Okay, first, let me just ask everybody to mute themselves. And if you have questions as we go along, go ahead. Feel free to just write them in the chat room. We'll be trying to get to your questions when Sharon is finished with the demonstration. And just remember, everyone's going to get an email from me tomorrow. Brittany will upload the presentation and put it on our YouTube channel, so you'll get the link. Plus, you'll get any extra information from tonight. And I understand there's some coupons coming. So without further ado, I just want to say I am so happy to introduce a very happy person, Sharon Gregory, who i.e. is called the Happy Vegan, and she has created, I don't know if you've bought it or not, but if you haven't yet, you will be, this delicious nacho no cheese dip. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks for having me tonight. I am so excited to be bringing you a full meal. We've got about 6 dishes that we're going to cook tonight. I'm calling it a Thanksgiving dinner, but certainly you could make this meal or bits and pieces of it for any time. We've got a lot to do today, and safety first. So you might see me looking down frequently because my dogs like to cook with me because they do like getting fresh veggies and fruit. So when they hear the knife out here, they're right under my feet. All right, so let me just give you a quick rundown of what we're going to be cooking tonight. First, we're going to be cooking a butternut squash soup. Then we're going to be cooking some mashed potatoes, creamy mashed potatoes. We're going to make a sesame crusted tofu. I have a stuffing to make with you, broccoli with nacho no cheese, and we'll top it all off with a mushroom gravy. So we've got a full agenda of cooking today. And because of that, I've pre-made a few things. I've done some prep, but I'll talk through everything that we're doing as well. And you'll be able to see all of these recipes on our blog at thehappyvegan.com. So first thing is, I said we would make a butternut squash soup. So with the butternut squash soup, of course, this is a butternut squash. I've already started to cut it. That's the hardest thing, I think, of the recipe is cutting your squash, because they can be tricky little buggers to cut. Now, I've already scored this a little bit so that I didn't have it be a jumper and not jump off the counter as they sometimes do. So I kind of cheated a little bit here. But when you roast a butternut squash, which is going to be the base for this soup, you'll want to cut it in half, just as I did. And you can pick out these seeds. I just usually take them right out with a spoon. Just take those out. You could roast these seeds. They're just pumpkins. Whoop! Got some on the floor, so the girls will be going crazy here. Hang on. All righty. So you'll just scoop out those seeds, and you're going to put that squash. I actually have one already made here. Don't worry, the oven is off. I didn't just reach into a hot oven. But I've already cooked 1/2 of a squash here. I put it on parchment paper. It just keeps things a little bit neater. And you can see here, you can see how soft this squash is. So now I've just got the good squash meat here. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to, whoops. And Manly and Ozzy are going to make it very difficult for me to keep a neat space here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this this roasted squash, and I just roasted this in the oven at about 350 degrees, and I roasted it for about 40 minutes, I'd say. And once you can see how soft that is, I'm just going to take the guts out here. I'll just put them in my blender. If you get some skin on there while you're doing that, that's okay. That's not going to hurt you. But you're going to try to get as much of the good meat out as possible. And as that can get a little bit messy here, scrape that out. can even double this recipe too, or you can use the other squash. You can put it on top of a salad, make it as a salad topper. That's always delicious. Or just serve it as a side dish with any other meal. So I always roast both halves of this. Sometimes I'll double this batch, but it does make a pretty big batch on its own. Now that I've got all of my squash in my container, I'm going to take a couple of cups of veggie broth. I like this brand, actually. It's low sodium, organic. Everything here will be organic. You can certainly make your own veggie broth too, which is super simple. Just take some onions, some parsley, some peppers, and garlic, and just boil that in water. So making your own veggie broth is actually really simple. But it's nice to have some prepared veggie broth in a pinch. I'm going to add a couple of cups to my blender. And I'm also going to add, I've got about a quarter of an apple here. And you don't have to add the apple, but it does help to make it a little bit, it gives it a little bit of sweetness. And I've got some seasonings here to add. I've got ginger, I've got cinnamon, and I've got some pepper and salt. I've got about half a teaspoon of each of these. You can certainly add more or less to your own liking. And I also have some sauteed onion and garlic. So just maybe a quarter of a cup of onion, and I have a garlic in there, and I just sauteed that. I'm going to add that to my container. And then I am going to take this over to the blender. Always make sure the lid's on. That's can be a catastrophe. Now I'm going to blend this. So this is a Vitamix, and with the Vitamix, I can actually make this soup from start to finish in the Vitamix. Because if you run the Vitamix, because it goes at such a high speed, if you run it for about 5 minutes, you're actually going to be cooking and heating up the soup as you go. You can do that with some other high-speed blenders too. But if you don't have that, that's perfectly okay. If you just have an immersion blender, that's fine as well. You'll just want to blend it enough to get it to a nice creamy consistency. Then you'll just want to put it in a pan, and then you just want to heat that up for about 10 minutes on the stove just to cook that. So I'm going to just give this a little bit of a whirl for about 30 seconds here. All right, that looks pretty smooth. So what I am going to do is, well, I'll turn my potato water down a little bit before I make a really big mess. I have in here, I've got some, I love Miyoko's butter. I've got a little bit of Miyoko's butter, a couple tablespoons of Miyoko's butter, and about 3 tablespoons of almond milk. That's just going to make it a little bit creamier. But you know what? You can leave these items out if you're, if you're watching calories or if you're watching additional fats or oil content. Leave these items out. It's still going to be super delicious without. But I'm going to add this in to my blender. And I'm just going to let that blend for another, just for about another 30 seconds or so. All right, I'll check this consistency, and oh yeah, the consistency looks perfect. Now, I would just let that blender run for another 5 minutes just to cook it that way, but you probably don't want to hear this blender running for 5 minutes. So I will spare you that. And I would just put this in a pot, like I said, and I can heat that up. But I already pre-made a batch here for you. And so I've just added a little bit of rosemary. I still have a lot of rosemary in my garden. So I've got just add a little bit of rosemary, and we've got a delicious butternut squash soup. Okay, so that's the butternut squash soup. Super delicious and a great time of year for it. Right, the next thing that I want to show you is I'm going to be making some mashed potatoes. Who doesn't love mashed potatoes? Well, I guess some people might not love mashed potatoes, but I certainly love mashed potatoes. I think they're at the top of my list for comfort warming foods. So how do you make mashed potatoes vegan? Very, very simply. Well, I already have over on the stove, over at the stove here, I've already started to boil my potatoes. So I've got some yellow potatoes here. Oh yeah, they are very boiled. I turned them on before the call started, so it only takes about 20 minutes, and I probably overdone it by about 20 minutes. No, I probably overdid it by about 15 minutes. But what I will do is what I was planning on doing was adding some broccoli to my water and then letting that broccoli steam right in the potato water. And what that does is that allows me to not have to clean 2 pans or boil water twice. However, because I did happen to boil down most of my water here, I don't have a lot of water left to boil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain these potatoes, make the mashed potatoes, and then we'll make the broccoli separately, which will be fine. I'll still use the same pot, so I won't have to dirty another pot. So I'm just going to put those potatoes in the colander here. Let those drip off. In my mixing bowl, I'm going to use a KitchenAid for this, a stand mixer. If you have a handheld mixer, you can use that. If you have just a potato masher, that's probably even better. The key, if you are using a hand mixer or a stand mixer, the key is not to over blend. So what do I have in my pot here? I've got some almond milk in here, maybe about 1/4 cup. I don't have a lot. I can always add more if I want them to be creamier. I've got about 2 or 3 tablespoons of the vegan Miyoko butter, and I have crushed a clove of garlic. Now you could add more garlic to your liking, and I do have some fresh ground pepper and salt in here. So I'm going to add my potatoes onto this mixture. All right, and then I'm going to put these on my KitchenAid here. Oh, you should always plug in your devices because that does really help operate them. So let's see here. Let me plug this in and give this a whirl. Like I said, you don't want to over process. So you're going to do it on a lower speed. Just keep an eye on these guys in here. It looks good. It's on about half speed here. Let me take a look at these. Question is, how many potatoes actually get to the plate when I'm making them? Well, not as many as are in the bowl right now, I will tell you that much, because it's always important to taste as you go, of course. All right, let's give those just a little bit lumpy. But if you like lumpy potatoes, then that's fine. Now here, if I do think that the potatoes are too thick, Then I can always add a little more almond milk, or I can add a little more butter if I think they need to be creamier. Let's definitely give it a taste test here. Oh, that's so good. I'm sorry that you can't have any of this right now, but you just have to take my word for it. It is really, really good. And that's a good consistency. I don't, like I said, you don't want to over-process. Don't want to over-process these. All right. So I've got my mashed potatoes here, and they do look creamy and delicious. So I'm going to just put some of those on a plate, here. And we'll come back to my broccoli here in a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some more water in that original pot so that I can steam this broccoli. All right, and it doesn't take too much water. We'll just bring this, we'll bring this water to a boil. When it boils, I'll throw this broccoli in just for a couple of minutes. You don't want to overcook your broccoli because that's just gross. And it also just takes your some of the more nutrients out. So I'm going to go ahead and start boiling that water. And the next dish that we're going to make is going to be my sesame crusted tofu. Now I'm going to make that in the air fryer. I got this air fryer. My husband got me this air fryer for Christmas last year. Best gift ever. Oh my goodness. I can't imagine my life pre-air fryer, really. So I'm going to make this sesame crusted tofu in the air fryer. Now, if you don't have an air fryer, you should go out and buy one right now. No, you don't have to do that. If you don't have an air fryer, that's okay. You can still make this. You can still cook it in the oven. You can just bake your tofu in the oven. It's still going to come out delicious. You can also do it on the skillet with some oil. I'm going to do it in the air fryer. So I'm going to, I unplugged this one. Let me plug this air fryer back in. And I'm going to preheat the air fryer. Super simple. I'm going to choose air fry. I'm going to bake this. I'm going to air fry this for about 20 minutes at 390 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's just get that heated up while we come over here and make our tofu, our sesame crusted tofu. Okay. So let me bring my ingredients over. First thing, of course, that you need is tofu. Now, for this batch, I just used Whole Foods brand organic extra firm tofu. So no matter what brand you use, of course, make sure it's organic and make sure it's extra firm. I've already pressed out my tofu. And if you don't have a tofu press, that's okay. I went for years without having a tofu press. And that's all right. All you'll need to do is just put it on a plate and put some paper towels on top and just to get the excess moisture out. And you don't have to press it for very long. You can probably press it just for, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And what you have then is a pressed piece of tofu. Now then, I am going to cut this tofu. This out of the way. Going to cut this tofu. All right. I'm going to cut this into little rectangles. I'm making my cuts about half an inch wide. Make it consistent. Whether you want to do it a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner, that's okay. Just try to make all the cuts consistent. And whether you're doing it in the air fryer, in the oven, or on the stove. So I've just cut my pieces in that direction, and then I'm going to make my cuts here. So I'm making about 1-inch cubes. This is what these ended up to be, about 1-inch cubes here. Now I'm going to add this tofu into a little bit of Bragg's liquid aminos, or you can use soy sauce, or you can use a gluten-free tamari. So I'm going to use the Bragg's liquid aminos and about a teaspoon of garlic powder, and that's just made my marinade. It's that simple. And I will add my tofu into here. The idea is to make sure that every piece gets coated. And I'm just going to add this in here. And the nice thing about this is this tofu is going to suck up this marinade. There's not a whole lot of marinade in here, only about 3 tablespoons of the tamari and a teaspoon of the garlic powder. This is going to absorb this liquid pretty quickly. So this isn't something that you have to let marinate for an hour overnight. I just mix it up just as I'm doing now. Make sure that all of my pieces are fully coated. You have to just be gentle when you stir the tofu. Even though it's extra firm, it still will fall apart a little bit. That's okay, but you want to try to keep your pieces intact as much as possible. So I just carefully stir that. You know, sometimes it's just easier to get those hands in there and move, make sure all the pieces are gently getting their coating. All right. And it should absorb all of the coating, or at least most of it, all of the liquid. So you can see that bowl is pretty dry in there now. There's very little liquid still left in the bottom. Once I have that tofu absorbing all of that liquid, then I'm going to add some raw sesame seeds, about 1/4 cup raw sesame seeds. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of arrowroot powder, or you can use cornstarch. It's just really going to be a thickener. And then I'm going to add about 4 teaspoons of this chickpea flour. You can use any sort of gluten-free flour, but I like chickpea flour. Oh, but you could use just almond flour or a mixed gluten-free flour. I've already got those mixed up in here. I've got my sesame seeds, my arrowroot powder, and my flour, my gluten-free flour. And I am going to mix that in with my tofu. The idea is to make sure that it all gets coated. Super simple. Super simple. But just be gentle. Like I said, you don't want your tofu to get too crumbly. We still want to be able to have full pieces. All right. Now, in the meantime, my air fryer, I heard that it is ready for me to add food. So it only took a few minutes to heat up. Now I am going to add some oil. I've got sunflower oil that I'm using. If you don't want to add oil, you don't have to add the oil. I do like it to be a little crispy, so you want to add, I will add just a tablespoon or 2 of the oil. When you are using an air fryer, because my heat's at 390 degrees, you can't use something like an olive oil. Well, you can, but olive oil has a low burn point, so it'll get pretty smoky in your house. This has a higher burn point, so that's why I'm using this organic sunflower oil. So I'm going to just coat the tofu. You don't have to use the oil, but it is going to make it, it is going to give it that crispy, that crispy texture. All right, now then I have my air fryer pan already prepared. I did spray that with just a little bit of oil just to keep it from sticking. I'm going to put this tofu mixture in the air fryer pan. And that can get a little bit messy. I'll bring that over here so you can see that. So I just got my air fryer pan, and it's just, you just want to try to make sure that the pieces don't overlap too much. And you can see how some of my pieces got cut up as I was stirring. I'll just try to keep them as separate as possible. Now, if you're doing this in the oven, you would just put this on a pan, bake them at about 350 degrees. I'd say check them after about 10 minutes, flip them over, and then bake them maybe another 5 to 10 minutes to whatever consistency you are looking for. If you're doing this on the stove, you'll want to add some oil to your skillet, and then you'll just want to stir these frequently in the skillet, and that should take probably about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes as well. With the air fryer, I'm going to let these fry for about 20 minutes. I will flip them over in about 10 minutes. So we'll take a peek at these in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to put these, this air fryer gets really hot, and I have burnt my knuckles several times here, so I've learned that the UGG glove is your best deal for putting the air fryer basket in and out. So I'm just going to put my air fryer basket in, close the lid, and it's automatically going to count down. And somebody's going to remind me in 10 minutes to make sure to flip the basket over. And I will show you what this is going to look like at the end of the cycle. So that is what you are going to be enjoying with this sesame crusted tofu. And it is taking a lot of willpower for me to put this away and not just eat it with you right now, but that would be very rude. So I'm not going to do that. Now, meanwhile, I have my water over here boiling. So I am going to give my broccoli just a quick little boil here. And let's try to not overdo these. Luckily, my potatoes are pretty forgiving. So if you do overcook the potatoes when you're doing mashed potatoes, that's probably not going to matter too much. But it will matter a lot with the broccoli. So I just added my broccoli. Oh, and it's just such a pretty, nice, bright green color. I do like my broccoli to still be a little bit crunchy, so I will not cook this for more than a minute. So I'm going to stand here right now and so that I don't overcook my broccoli. And I do have a visitor down here waiting for her broccoli because Manly loves broccoli. Do you want to come up and say hello again? Do you want to come up and see what's going on again? Okay. You know, it's always so sanitary, I know, to cook with your puppies, but they do like to be in the kitchen with me. They do really like to be in the kitchen with me. You're a good girl. You're a good girl. All right, well, let me give my hands a quick rinse here. And by that time, my broccoli should be done without overcooking it. Yay. All right. Yes, it looks fantastic. So it's still nice and green. We're still going to have some nice crispiness to this broccoli. If you do want it to be softer, then just cook it a little bit longer. Just keep a close eye on it because it will cook quickly. I will put that in the colander, drain that. Put it back in my bowl. There we go. And then, as I promised, I will be adding I chose Nacho No Cheese Tangy for this because this has a nice tangy, lemony flavor. So this is going to be my substitute for butter, lemon, and cheese. So I'm going to I don't have a whole lot of broccoli here. I'm just going to take about a tablespoon or two, and I am just going to mix this up. And it's going to incorporate in here. So if you're not a huge vegetable fan, this is certainly a way to help to maybe get a few more veggies into your diet, right? Eat more plants. There we go. So we've got some tangy nacho no cheese with our steamed broccoli. You could use any of the flavors. I just chose tangy because I like the extra lemon zest because I think that goes really nicely with steamed veggies. But I have hot, which is actually my favorite. But then we also have a classic flavor too, which is just that cheesy flavor. But any of those will work nicely on the broccoli. And with this sauce, you don't need to add any extra salt or pepper. It's going to give you all of the seasonings that you need. All right. Now then, let us look at stuffing. Let's make some gluten-free and vegan stuffing. Got some ingredients here. Well, the first thing is, of course, with stuffing is you need bread. And I found this bread that I really like a lot. If you're, and it's sometimes hard to find good gluten-free bread that's also vegan because a lot of the gluten-free breads have eggs in them or milk. And so sometimes it's hard to find a good vegan and gluten-free bread. But I found this called Little Northern Bakehouse. And wow, is it really good? It's vegan and it's gluten-free. I had to buy it online, but there's some local stores. We're in Pittsburgh here. I think Sorgel's carries this. There are some local stores that carry this. But anyway, I took about 6 slices of bread, and I did this last night. I took 6 slices of bread and I cubed it. So I've got just got like 1-inch pieces of this bread. And I just let it sit out in this bowl overnight. I didn't put anything over top of it. So it's gotten a little bit hard, but that's going to actually make the stuffing a little bit better. If you forget and realize, oh my goodness, it's today, I wanted to make the stuffing, but I forgot to put it out last night, that's okay. It will still work. So that's perfectly fine. I've got, like I said, about 6 slices cubed up here. And what I'm going to be adding to this is I made some lentils. I cooked some lentils, and lentils are super simple to cook. I just rinse these lentils. Lentils out in a really thin colander. And I cooked about 1 cup of lentils to about 2.5, 3 cups of liquid. You could use veggie broth or you could use just water. So I had already cooked these lentils, and I had also sauteed while my lentils were cooking. I sauteed some celery and onions, and I decided to put in some portobello mushroom. If you don't like mushroom, well, then don't add the mushroom. But I thought it would make a nice little extra for my stuffing here. I sauteed that. In my bowl here, then I've got those cooked lentils. I have about 1 cup of cooked lentils. So I did have some extras in that batch that I made. I've got about 1 cup of cooked lentils. I've got that mixture, that onion, celery, and mushroom sauteed mixture. And I have added a couple cups of veggie broth. And that's the liquid that you see. I think I even threw in there a little bit of parsley because I've got a lot of good parsley still out in my garden. And so I put some parsley in there too. And I added about 1/2 teaspoon of sage. You could do more or less according to your taste. You can add some salt and pepper. I did not add any salt and pepper. I find I get enough salt from the broth, but you can certainly add some extra salt. I did not add pepper to this yet, but you can also do this after cooking too, just to salt and pepper to your taste. And I have some flaxseed here. I needed to make a binder. When you think about making stuffing and you think about maybe putting like an egg or something to bind it together. And so I've made that little binder with ground flaxseed and water. I took 1 tablespoon of the ground flaxseed and I added about 3 tablespoons of hot water. And you get this little concoction here. And so what I'm going to do is, like I said, that's going to act as my binder. I'm going to add that to my lentil and broth mixture. Just like that. I'm going to stir that up really well. And I'm going to add that to my cut up bread. So we're going to add this to our cut up bread. Oh, it smells so good. If this is too dry, you can add more broth. Just want to mix that up really well. You don't, and I'm doing this slowly because I don't want to get too wet. You can always add more liquid, but you can't take too much liquid out. It's always better to go slow and add more if you need to, versus just dumping everything in and finding out that it is just a little too wet. But I think this is going to be perfect. I don't think I'm going to need any extra broth here. All right. Now then, just stir that up. Make sure all these pieces are nicely coated. And right. And I'm going to transfer this. Yeah, I don't need any more broth to this. This is plenty wet without being soggy. You just don't want it to be soggy. You don't want to see any extra liquid just hanging out at the bottom of the bowl there. You really want to make sure that your bread absorbs all of that broth liquid. And you can always just, as I said, if you needed to wet it a little bit more, you could use more broth, or you could just add a little bit of water too. I'm going to add this mixture, this stuffing mixture, into my oiled pan. I've got a little bit of coconut oil on this pan, but before I do that, I'm going to come over here and give my sesame crusted tofu a little bit of love here. So I need to just flip these pieces over, and oh yeah, this smells so good. I'm just going to flip these pieces over. All right, there we go. That's good. So we'll let that go for another about 9 minutes. If we smell it, burning a little bit, then we'll cut that timer just a little bit short. All right, back to my stuffing. Let's add this stuffing to this greased pan. There, oh, look how pretty that looks. That looks yummy. It smells really good, and it's not even cooked. Well, the lentils are cooked. And then we're going to put some foil over top of that, and we're going to pop this in the oven. Well, I would have the oven on, but I don't have the oven on. But I would pop this in here at 350, and I would bake that for 45 minutes. And then at 45 minutes, I would take that aluminum foil off so that the top can get a little bit brown, and then maybe bake it for about another I'd say 10 minutes. But I already created a batch of this yesterday, and so that is what you're going to see, just some delicious stuffing. Now the next thing that we need to do is our gravy, because what are mashed potatoes and stuffing and this sesame crusted tofu without a delicious gravy? So I'm going to make a gravy for you, and I'm going to come over to the stove here and make this gravy with you. All right, first thing is I'm going to just heat up a little bit of oil. Probably a couple of tablespoons of oil in there. And we're going to heat this up. Once this oil heats up, I'm going to add my onions. These onions are going to saute for a few minutes, just to soften them up a little bit. Ultimately, everything is going to go in the blender. So they are going to go in the blender, but we do want to soften them up. And Manly is very excited right now. So let's go ahead and add these onions here. My oil wasn't really hot enough, but that's okay. It will heat up. That is all right. We're going to just saute. We're going to saute this, like I said, for about 2 or 3 minutes. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add a mixture here of nutritional yeast and gluten-free flour. So the nutritional yeast, I'm using about a 1/4 cup of that. And for the gluten-free flour, I've got probably about a 1/2 cup of that. The gluten-free flour that I chose for this was, I'm just using a Bob's Red Mill, and it's a 1-to-1 baking flour. It is gluten-free, but you could do this very well with a chickpea flour, like we did with our Sesame Crusted Tofu, or you could use an almond flour or an oat flour. Really, any kind of flour should work fine for this gravy. And the nutritional yeast, that's going to help thicken the mixture, but also just give it that little bit of an extra, like little cheesy flavor. Even though you don't necessarily think of gravy as having a cheesy flavor, just really adds something to the flavor profile of this gravy. And I also like it because it's filled with B vitamins too. So from a nutritional standpoint, it's a nice add for really anything. Actually, it's the main ingredient in nacho no cheese. So I do like my nutritional yeast. Let's see what's going on over here with my onions. Oh yeah, they're just sauteing up there pretty nicely. And while I'm thinking of it, before I add my dry ingredients, let me just take a peek over here at the tofu and make sure that it's not getting, oh yeah, that tofu looks like it's pretty well done. I'm going to, we're about 16 minutes into this tofu, but look, it's got that nice like brown color to it, just nice golden brown. It's not falling apart. So we've got a really great consistency. I'm going to stop this tofu from cooking any further right now. I'll just leave it in here for with the lid open. So back to my gravy. Now our onions are sauteing nicely. They're just like bubbling, having a little dance around in there in that oil. Now I'm going to add those dry ingredients. Like I said, the nutritional yeast and the flour. I'm going to add those. When I add these, it's going to thicken up really, really fast. So fast that the whole mixture is going to get really dry. So I'm just going to try to spread that out. And this doesn't take long because this is going to dry up really quickly. So the idea is to incorporate those onions and that little bit of oil in with this flour nutritional yeast mixture. Let's do that quickly so that we're not burning anything, and we want it to dry up. When we get this mixture dried, it's almost there. 2 minutes max. Now you can see how it just looks very crumbly. I still have the heat on. I have not turned the heat down. I have not turned the heat off. And I see no more oil or wet. And I don't want it to burn. So I'm going to go right into adding my liquid. And so what I have in my liquid here, I'm going to shake this up. I'm going to start adding this in slowly. Let's do it this way. And what's in this liquid? Well, I can't tell you that. No, I can tell you. It is Bragg's liquid aminos. I've got about 2 tablespoons of Bragg's liquid aminos in here. I've got 2 cups of water, just 2 cups of filtered water. That's why I make it in this little jar, because this jar holds 2 cups. So I pretty much just filled up this jar with water, and then I added the 2 tablespoons of the Bragg's liquid aminos or soy sauce or tamari, whatever you have. And then I also added in this mixture, in this liquid mixture, I also added some garlic powder, about a teaspoon of garlic powder, and I put about a teaspoon of thyme in here as well. And I'm just incorporating this into the mixture so you can see how it's thickening up, bubbling up. It's still dry. It's still dry. I'm gonna make sure all those seasonings are gonna come out. And again, I haven't touched my heat, and this is such a forgiving gravy. You know, if you've ever made gravy in the past, you know, it can get a little bit finicky, but what's so forgiving about this is, maybe it's cheating, I'm not sure. We're gonna throw this in the blender in the end. So you might be looking and saying, oh my goodness, this is going to have so many lumpies in it. Yep, it will, but I'm gonna take all those lumps out in the blender. But I do want to cook this for a few minutes. So I want this to thicken up. I want this sauce to, I'm not worried about the lumps, but I want this sauce to start to thicken up. And you can see that it's doing that. And it won't take long. Now I'm going to continuously stir that. For the most part, continuously stir that. And I keep stirring that. Let it bubble. So it is at a boil here. Now, I also will make this with mushrooms. You can, when we were sauteing the onions, you could also saute some mushrooms if you wanted, but then those mushrooms will get blended into the mixture, and that's fine. It's just going to give it a nice mushroom gravy flavor. You just won't see the mushrooms. And that's certainly an option for this gravy. Or you can cook it as we're cooking now, but when you're done with the skillet and you're blending the gravy to make it to make it smooth, you can saute some mushrooms and then just add those mushrooms on top of the gravy if you like the idea of having the full chunks of mushrooms. Either way is your preference. Or if you don't like mushrooms, then just don't even bother with that. So you can see how this is starting to thicken up. Again, I know I've got the lumps in here. I wasn't expecting to take those out, and that is okay. So you can see how that's thickening up as I take my spatula through here. It is leaving a little bit of a path here, and that's good. It is thickening that flour, the flour and the liquid. They are doing their job and making this thick. I'm just going to give this a couple of more stirs, and then we are going to add this to the blender. Okay, that looks pretty thick to me. Again, the purpose now, to turn your heat off, the purpose now in the blender will be to smooth everything out. And that's one of the reasons I like this recipe so much, is that it is so very forgiving. So I'm going to, whoops, sorry about that. I'm going to come over here and empty this into the blender. All right. There we go. Just carefully dump this in. We don't want to lose any of this goodness. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, it smells so good. And once this gets nice and creamy, there we go. Or if you have an immersion blender, you can do that too. You can probably do that right in the pot. Right. Well, then let's just put this on the blender, on the base. And put the lid on. Okay, let's check it out here. Oh yeah, you can see that. You can see that steam coming off of here. Let's see, and we want to check that, and it looks beautiful. I am actually going to put that in for another maybe 30 seconds because it's not perfectly smooth, and I really want my gravy to be perfectly smooth, and I can do that just by a little more, a little more power on this. On the blender here. All right. And there we have our gravy. Certainly we could pour that over our dish right now. Or if you've made this in advance, you can just pour it into a jar. You can see how smooth that gravy is. And if you do have the mushrooms, you could add those mushrooms right here or add those on top of your dish. And that is your Thanksgiving dinner meal. And we also have our soup over here too. Let me grab this soup. And actually I could put some gravy over the sesame tofu as well. And there you have it. Also, I wanted to thank everybody for joining me today for this fun little feast. And I did want to tell you about the coupon that Sally is going to be sending everyone, and that is for 30% off of a jar of nacho, no cheese. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving and a great holiday season. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Sharon.
Yes.
That looks so good. We all want a bite. Okay.
I know. That's the only bad thing about virtual is that I can't have samples for everybody.
I know. But there's a couple questions that came up in the chat.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. One of them is, what's the name of the bread that you said you use, the gluten-free bread?
Yeah. So it's called Little Northern Bakehouse. And they have this one, and this one is their whole grain wide slice. And I can actually even eat that plain. And if you ever eat gluten-free bread, that's probably those words you've probably never said about gluten-free bread is that I can eat it plain because usually it needs to be toasted or something has to be done to it. But this is actually pretty good. I do like that. I've used Shar's as well, SCHAR. I've used Shar's as well. And that makes really nice stuffing too.
Okay, another question was your tofu press. What brand? Someone want to know what brand.
Oh, this was an Amazon special, and I bought it a couple years ago. And it just says Easy Tofu Press. I don't know if you can see that. It just says Easy Tofu Press. I think it was like $20 on Amazon. So if you just look up Easy Tofu Press, and it's just so simple to use. Your tofu just goes in the center, and then these things just twist. Just set it on its side and let it drain in the sink. I really did go for a couple of years thinking I could just squeeze out my tofu just on paper towels. And while that does work, I found this to be a lot easier.
Okay. Yes. So someone else want to know, do you use miso at all to get the salty taste in food? You cook with miso?
With miso?
Yes.
I personally don't because I don't like the flavor of it. I have tried it in multiple recipes, but for me, it's not one of my favorite ingredients.
And someone said, I think that was answered, your air fryer, it's a Ninja air fryer.
It is. It's called the Ninja Foodie Grill. And I think I should call Ninja and tell them I'll be like a sales rep for them, because it's, I love this because it does air frying, it roasts, it bakes. I've actually baked chocolate chip cookies in here, vegan chocolate chip cookies, no joke. And it grills. So I've made some great grilled veggies, or like if you're doing a Beyond Burger or something like that, it's just really great. It does dehydrate too, but it's too small for me to dehydrate. And there's a great cookbook that I found. And actually, let me grab that cookbook. You can stay on the air fryer. Let me just grab this cookbook.
If you have an Instant Pot pressure cooker, there is an addition that you can buy that will turn your Instant Pot into an air fryer.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's a great idea if you already do use an Instant Pot. I have one, and I found I don't really use my Instant Pot, because even when I make rice, I just prefer doing it on the stove. But yeah, that's a great idea, because then you don't have to have 5 gadgets. But this, and you could probably use this even if you added the basket to the Instant Pot too. I love this cookbook. It's by Tess Chalice, and I've got several different cookbooks, vegan air fryer cookbooks. Thank you, Tori. This one is absolutely my favorite. And as a matter of fact, that sesame crusted tofu recipe I adapted that from this book. So love this. If you do have an air fryer.
Okay. The name of the author again, the book author?
Yes, it is Tess Chalice. And so it's TESSCHALLIS. And I bought it on Amazon. I think it's like under $13 actually right now. 75. The only thing that's it doesn't have pictures. So if you're the kind that likes pictures in your cookbook, this is a little bit boring. But the recipes are so simple, and it's my go-to when I'm trying to think of how do I start something in the air fryer vegan.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, some people commented here. I'll send you some, but they can't believe that you cooked all this food in less than an hour. It's really true.
It's a lot of food.
You have inspired us.
Well,
really
good.
have.
Yes, well, good. And I just can't wait to be able to eat it now, because I've been smelling this food, and yeah. And it's not hard. Vegan cooking is not hard. It does take some prep, chopping some things up and having those things in the refrigerator so you can just grab and cook.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I appreciate it, and as we've said, people will be getting an email with recipes and coupons and some of the information in the chat. And just thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Sally. And thanks everybody for spending your Thursday evening with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes. And tomorrow, Harriet, I will provide the information. And Brittany said, yes, I have next week. The next meeting I will be doing it next Wednesday on reading food labels.
Oh,
so if you have some labels that you want me to read, it's like reading your poem, huh? Send me a picture, but please make it a distinct picture of I've gotten some that I can't read. A picture. Yes. Okay, well, thank you again. We appreciate all your hard work here.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks for vegging out with me, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.